Variables are like putting a label on a box or a collar on a dog. They provide information and help keep things organized. The thing that variables are labeling or storing is called their value. For example, if the collar is the variable, then my dog is the value. But unlike labels and collars, there are rules for how variables must be named. First, their names need to be descriptive. While it might be fun to name our variables random things like yeehaw, it will make our code very hard to read and understand later on. Choose names that will easily remind you what the variable is for. Additionally, variable names usually cannot contain special characters besides dashes and underscores, shouldn't start with numbers, and can't contain spaces. In order to avoid using spaces in variable names, many programmers use something called camel case. Camel case just means that instead of using spaces, you capitalize the first letter of each word, usually excluding the first one. It's called camel case because it makes our variable names have a bump, kind of like a camel's back. But if you prefer, you can just use dashes or underscores instead. Variables make our code more versatile and reusable. For example, you can take a collar off one dog and use it for a different dog. In the same way, let's say I'm using a variable to store the number of frogs in a room. At first, I might set the value to 2, but when another frog stops by, I'll need to update it to 3. I can use the same variable for an entirely different value. But depending on the programming language that you're using, you can't always use the same variable for a different type of value. For example, with number of frogs, it should always be a number and never something else like a word. What types of values are there? The main kinds are strings, integers, and floats or doubles. Strings just means words, integers just means numbers without decimals, and floats and doubles just means numbers with decimals. In some programming languages, when we create a variable, we have to decide what type of variable it will be. Will it be used for integer values, maybe string values? If we decide it will be an integer value, then try to use it for strings, our code will not work, so make sure to choose wisely. To decide what type of variable ours will be, all we have to do is write the type before the name. Again, it all depends on what programming language you are using. If you're using Python, for example, you never have to tell the computer what type of variable you're making. But if you're using C++, then you'll need to decide the type as shown here. So if you're not sure what programming language you're using, feel free to ask a Streamwise team member. Now let's try making some variables of your own.